Hello and welcome to the round 2 review. I am sick. I went to sleep on Friday, a little bit of a throat tickle, and then woke up with God knows what. Before we get into the review, I just want to say a big thank you. I've now been doing AFL videos for like a year and they've gotten pretty well received, and I just want to share my gratitude that it's being accepted. Footy has been a big part of my life, literally my whole life, and I never really had an outlet for it, so I'm very appreciative that I get to have an outlet and people are engaging with it, so thank you so much. Now, into the games. Last week I said maybe the rule changes are good for the game. Maybe I was wrong. The soft tissue injuries this week have been absurd, and the scoring from really tight to blowouts isn't really working anymore. We'll get into the games. So Thursday night we had Hawthorn Sydney. Again, just to recap, I don't watch Thursday night games because I go to sleep because I go to work. So I watch them on Friday. And man, Hawthorn should not have won that game. They squandered all of their chances in front of goal, and alas, here we are. And I'm pretty sure it was just the pressure from Newcomb and Moore that did it for the game. The MCG has some trauma for the Swans, and I think that it might have gotten into their headspace a little bit after half-time. It was close the whole time as well. So it wasn't like, oh, Sydney were winning, and then all of a sudden Hawthorn came back. No, Hawthorn were in it the whole time. But their pressure just slowly went up, and they just pelted it at goal. They didn't even need it to go through the middle because they were just pelting it. At the end of the day, the more you score, apparently the more you win, doesn't matter how accurate you are. And, you know, I didn't realise how impactful Goulden was in that opening round. Because after he got injured last week, obviously shit has hit the fan in that midfield. He is the glue on the birthday card at the Sydney Football Club. It was a good game. That was actually a pretty good game to watch. It was quite entertaining. Moving on to another entertaining game, Adelaide and the Western Bulldogs in Adelaide, and the Doggies come out on top. I watched some of the first quarter, and then I watched Project Hail Mary in the cinema, and then I came out and saw the Dogs won. And then I look at the highlight, I'm like, fuck me, that's Oscar Baker. Oscar Baker, who used to play for Melbourne, who used to be just another guy on the ground because you had Petrarca, Oliver, Gawn, Viney. Bevo has turned Oscar Baker into one of the most important one percenters at the Western Bulldogs Football Club that I've ever seen. He was everywhere. Everywhere. And then he scores the match winner. And poor Jordan Dawson, guy has carried the Adelaide Football Club for God knows how long, injured. But that was probably the only highlight of the Adelaide Football Club, is Jordan Dawson getting injured. Like, that's probably the main takeaway. Whereas your Doggies, you've got Oscar Baker and Joel Frazier. Great outing, 3-2. Pretty good from Joel Frazier. Richards again just does what he does. Bontempelli does what he does. Lewis in the middle as always. You know, they are a flag contender. Then we've got Richmond and the Gold Coast. We knew the outcome of this game, but the Victorian Demons just fucking put their claws into the Gold Coast Suns. Tracks out with an injury, and Bailey Humphrey's got 2 weeks. Neither of them will see the Melbourne clash during Easter. I don't know if it says more about Gold Coast than it does for West Coast and Richmond, but the fact that they're not smashing those teams by 100 is a little bit concerning, I think, for Gold Coast. Not taking away from the younger teams, they are putting in so much effort to not get smashed. They're showing heart, they're showing soul, they're showing pressure, they're showing, you know, accuracy in front of goal to not get smashed. But you've got a team full of A-listers in Gold Coast. They should be putting these games away by more than 60 to boost their percentage. And then we go to Upset Village, Upset Town, GWS St Kilda. Honestly, I think that game was done at quarter time, where the Saints kicked 5-4 and GWS scored 1-3. It's a tough comeback from that sort of scoreline, and the fact that they did, and it was only a 4-point margin at the end of the game. St Kilda suck. But the Giants just weren't prepared for that for some reason when they really should have been. It was at home, the Saints had to travel, It was in their element, ball was literally in their court, and they just squandered it. And last week I said if Hogan doesn't kick 2, they lose. Hogan kicked 2 and they still lost. Don't know what's going on at the Giants, but they should not have lost to the Saints. I thought the Saints were going to be 0-4. It might not be like a 3-1 or a 2-2, which is a pretty good turnaround considering they were 0-2. And then we go to Melbourne Freo. Melbourne just looked shit. And I knew this was going to be the outcome. I foresaw this was going to be the outcome. You got a young side, they're travelling for the first time, new coach, new game plan, and you're versing a squad who statistically on paper is younger, but they've all played the same amount of games together, so they're a lot more like that, whereas Melbourne is a little bit like this at the moment. But also our players who have played 50, 100, 200 games with fumbly and missing targets and making bad decisions, and then they're putting pressure on the young kids because they're doing that. And we reverted back to the Simon Goodwin long down the line into congestion on the wing. Bomb it long into the 50. No lowering of the eyes, no widening the ground like I saw last week against St Kilda. Just fucking... just wasn't good. And full credit to Freo. First game in the West for the year, wanted to put on a show. Got Colton Falstrup. Surprisingly good tagger. He quieted Naz and he quieted Sarong. So it is working, but we obviously are isolating a player from the rest of the team. So I don't know what the game plan next week is for the Ds. Yeah, I don't know what the game plan next week is for the Ds. Who do we have? Carlton. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, Melbourne have Carlton and Freo have Richmond. So Freo will take that momentum to Richmond and they will do the same thing that they did to Melbourne to Richmond next week. Voss is a tool. That's all I have to say on the matter. Then we go to Port Adelaide, Essendon. Port took the loss against North to heart. Again, back home, game in the South Australia, in front of home crowd. They took it. They grabbed that game by the nuts. Essendon also just suck. I do not rate Essendon. I don't rate Essendon. I didn't rate the power. I thought this game would be very much like the first 2 of the round where they were a lot closer in terms of the scoreline, but they weren't. Power just thumped them. It was a hard watch. I watched Caldwell miss one point blank in the goal square, and that basically encapsulates it. Parrish and McGrath were butchering the ball back to stock standard usual at the Essendon Football Club, and to add salt to the wound, injuries galore at Essendon. So I don't know what Brad Scott's going to do with that fucking club, but alongside them in hell is returning from a quick short holiday is North Melbourne. You go to the West after pelting Port. You have momentum, you lose to West Coast. In a thriller. Game of the round has to be West Coast North Melbourne. I can't lie. That game, North came out firing in the first half. They were all over it. Larky kicked 6 at halftime. West Coast come out of the rooms. Pressure galore. It wasn't like the skill was at a high level for North West Coast. Like, they were still fumbly. They're still kids. They're still getting their bearings. They were widening the ground. They were laying chase tackles. Even Cherry was doing like run down tackles as a ruckman to try and keep North in the game. It was a great match. It was a phenomenal match. And, you know, it shows that West Coast actually had, like, all that drafting is starting to come together into this boiling pot of talent that's finally starting to work together and, you know, win matches. Because you've got Yo, you've got Kelly, you've got, who else is old? Waterman, Baker, Cripps. You know, you've got these old blokes who are sort of mentoring all of these top 10 draft picks, and they're starting to finally mesh. And it's really good to see. You know, between the battle of the wooden spoons, it wasn't a blowout like we were kind of expecting it to be, especially after what North did last week. I think most of us were expecting North to just come in and belt them, which they did in the first half, but again, West Coast just came out with fire in the guts and just went hard. They went harder, and that's what won them the game. And they were just slaughtering them. After halftime, like, third quarter, they kicked 6 goals. So there's that. And then, you know, you've got Brisbane, Carlton, Collingwood and Geelong who will have buys after playing 2 matches, but that's fine. It's not like I'm upset or anything that Melbourne get their first bye in round 16 or anything, because the league just fucks around with the fixture, but what do I know? Anyway, this is just going to be a short one. I'm on literally speed at the moment to try and get rid of my cold. So I'm going to end it here, but I'll see you all next week. Let me know if your team won. Can't wait for Melbourne Carlton. I'll see you all later.